What is up, Senders? We are talking about the version 6 Santa Cruz Nomad. At a whopping 170 rear travel, the Nomad's actually the bike in the Santa Cruz lineup with the most travel outside of their full-on V10 downhill bike. This is a controversial bike release because Santa Cruz took it from being a park rat favorite full 27.5 now to a mullet or mixed wheel setup. At 170 travel, this thing is obviously built to shred downhill, but spoiler alert, I personally think this thing is packing in more versatility than the travel would indicate. I'm going to be giving you my long-term impressions and help you decide, is the new Nomad the bike that's going to fix all of your mountain biking problems? So for the bike check, we'll look at my specific build. For starters, running the 2023 RockShox Zeb 170 travel. And for the shock, this is the 2023 RockShox Super Deluxe Ultimate Coil. It's a complete redesign compared to the 2022 version that I had on my Bronson. The biggest change is that it now has high and low speed compression adjust, but it also has HBO. HBO is hydraulic bottom out. That's where you can actually add some compression at the end of the stroke to provide more ramp up, similar to what you would get in an air shock. And that's a good segue into talking about the updated kinematics of this new Nomad. This lower link VPP's design has been around for a few years for Santa Cruz, but on these newer bikes, they have revamped them even more. And it seems like on all of the newer bikes, they are adding a noticeable increase in progression. This is the first Santa Cruz lower link bike where I've not been compelled to get an aftermarket lower link. And even with the coil spring, I'm not noticing any harsh bottom outs. I think one of my favorite components on this whole setup are these 5-dev trail cranks. Now, the most noteworthy thing about these cranks is that these are actually 160 millimeter length cranks.
160 millimeter length cranks.
These are by far the shortest cranks that I've ever ran. And I will say that that is one of the possible cons of the Nomad, is that it has a super low bottom bracket. Especially if you were running this in the low setting, that bottom bracket is way down there and you will get a lot of pedal strikes, especially if you were in chunky terrain where you're having to do a lot of quick and steep up and overs. And so I actually was prompted to try these 160 cranks almost out of necessity, but they have played out super well. And that pairs really nicely with their super slim pedals. They are one of the slimmest pedals, if not the thinnest, that I've ever ran. They have really good grip and they're also going to help you with less pedal strikes. For the drivetrain, running a GX Axis setup, that's been pretty tried and true now on 3 bikes for me. I've been very fortunate to be able to run the Reserve 30 carbon wheels. I've had the Reserve wheels in the past on my version 2 Santa Cruz Hightower. They were really stiff, almost to a fault. These have a little more of a damped and muted feel, which actually plays out really well on this big and burly bike. For dropper posts, running a 1-up 180. I tried to get a 210, it just would not go. Still a nice low drop, and I'm still running the Anomaly switch grade, which is a saddle adjust that I had also on my custom Bronson build. You can tilt the saddle down for your climbing, and then you can tilt it down in the opposite direction to help get an even lower drop for your descending. And then you can also have that neutral position for just your normal trail scenarios. 1-up carbon bar in the 30 rise, cut down to about 770. And then I'm running the same SRAM code RSC brakes with the aftermarket Cascade components calipers that I was also running on my Bronson. And those pair super great with the SRAM HS2 rotors. So let's get into the ride impressions. The interesting thing about my relationship with the Nomad is that I've not actually spent a ton of time in bike parks since owning the Nomad. I've actually been spending a ton of time on it here locally, which you can get on really with a short travel trail bike very easily. But I have been able to spend a lot of time in Pisgah, in the DuPont State Forest, none of which really require this huge of a bike. And so despite being significantly overbiked in most of those places, certainly there's riding in Pisgah where this is not out of place at all, but generally speaking, I have been well overbiked. I've still had a blast. I've still had a complete blast in being overbiked. There's something to be said for having that extra capability and just finding those features on the trail that make you want to go full gas, that you would be nervous to do it on a shorter travel trail bike. And that is a great lead in to talk specifically about the climbing. If I were to rate a super lightweight XC hardtail with carbon wheels as a 10 out of 10 on climbing, if I were going to rate a downhill bike as a 1 of 10, I would probably put the Santa Cruz Blur at a solid 9 out of 10. The 5010 I would consider to be about a 7.5 out of 10. I would rate the Nomad as probably a 5 or a 6. Put that in contrast against the downhill bike that I would rate as a 1. I would still take this bike pretty much anywhere that I would take a downhill bike, but I could also pedal it anywhere that I could take the 5010 and probably even take the Blur. The Nomad is just simply not going to get there quite as fast, but it is a quite comfortable climber. The traction of the rear suspension is quite good. And so for just generic trail ride, weaving in and out flowy single track, with it being the Mullet setup, it helps preserve a little bit of playfulness that if it were a full-on 29er, I think it would be missing. I've really been digging the Mullet setup. I just came off from a Bronson prior to the Nomad. I definitely like the mixed wheel setup because it helps this bigger bike still feel playful. And so now, probably what everyone is here for, let's talk about the downhill performance of the Nomad. I think it would go without saying this thing is an absolute savage. I feel like you can roll this Nomad into pretty much any situation and you are going to live to tell about it as long as your skill set can take you there. I have actually previously owned the version 1 Mega Tower. I've also gotten to do some trail rides on the version 2 Mega Tower. If I were going to compare these two bikes, I would still give a nod toward the capability side to the Mega Tower. The other main knock that I can find on the Nomad, when you land in a pile of roots or a pile of rocks, there is an occasion where the rear wheel will hang up. I'm not entirely sure if it's just the kinematics of the rear suspension of the Nomad or just the fact that it's a mixed wheel or a Mullet. I do think that they're a little bit more prone to hang up in those situations. And thus, after spending time on the version 2 Mega Tower, I've done at least a few trail rides on that newer Mega Tower and spending a lot of time on the Nomad. Definitely think the more playful bike is the Nomad. I think the better all-around bike is the Nomad. I found the Mega Tower to be just a little bit more of a chore on those mellower trails. It just seemed like it was even more raked out. Even though the travel is more on the Nomad, I still feel like this is the snappier, more playful bike. Again, I think much in part due to that mixed wheel setup. Quick bit on the new GLOVEBOX. Fits right here under the bottle cage. Has two pouches. One is sort of a tool wrap, another is a tube wrap. Of course, you could put in there whatever you want. It's never caused any noticeable noise that I've perceived. And perhaps the only thing worth noting is if you wash your bike, this is not completely watertight. Those pouches will get wet. Quick blurb on high versus low setting and sizing. To start with, I am 5'9" with about a 31-inch inseam. This is a size large. I prefer running this in the low setting. In the low setting, your reach is reduced by about 5 millimeters. People claim on the internet that you can't tell a difference between that high and low setting, but you absolutely can tell a difference. For me, probably most noticeable is the reach. I am coming in on the super low end of a size large, and so I prefer the shorter reach. And a quick note on the finish. As you can tell, this is a matte black finish. I was super worried that this thing was going to scratch to pieces. I don't know how they managed to do it, but this finish has been super, super durable. It does not seem to chip really at all in these 4 to 6 months that I've been on this bike. And so if you're on the fence about which color to get, that's preference, but I can at least say this is much more durable than what I thought it was going to be. So, concluding thoughts, should you buy a Santa Cruz Nomad? If you're someone who is looking to go and smash the roughest terrain, but perhaps you still have some local trails that are on the milder side, you want a bike that can take you into every situation. With the Nomad being the mixed wheel setup, I definitely think that it should be on your radar. It's still a snappier accelerating bike than its sibling, the full 29er Mega Tower. If you're someone that's on the fence about a Bronson or a Nomad, if you already own a Bronson, I've already got you covered with my last video where we looked at how to overbuild the Bronson and get it really super close to feeling like this Nomad. But if you haven't already purchased the bike and you're someone that thinks, well, I want to put a Zeb or a Fox 38 on my Bronson, definitely just get the Nomad. This thing is going to pedal just as well, if not a little better. It's going to have all the capability and it's just built for it right out of the box. This thing is so snappy, it is so pedalable. Why get a bike with shorter travel if you're looking to go and smash that bigger terrain? It is a great time to be a mountain biker because the decision is tough. You could probably take a 5010 to a bike park. You can certainly get some cross-country miles on the Nomad. I've been doing it for the last several months. You just have to find out where you want to be on that scale of playfulness versus capability. If you're going to be spending a lot of time in bike parts, I would get the Nomad 10 times out of 10. If you're someone that's only going to be taking maybe a trip or two per year to a bike park and you still want a better all-rounder bike, you might be looking at the Bronson. If your local trails are super mellow, maybe you'll go once a year to a bike park, rent a downhill bike, get a 5010, or put that Hightower on your radar. So if I've confused you thoroughly, definitely hit us up here at Summer Cycle. Give us a call, shoot us a Facebook message, give us an email, ask us some questions, let us help you decide which trail bike is right for you. We love helping people get set up with the bike of their dreams. Do me a solid, ask me a question, leave me a comment in the comment section, help this video get out to more people. Hit the like button, definitely subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already. As always, thanks for watching.